New York Times reporter Andrew Ross Sorkin has just published a new book, Too Big to Fail, the inside story of how Wall Street fought to save the financial system and themselves. He joins me in our MoneyWatch studios. Hi, Andrew. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I haven't read the entire book. 586 pages is big, but I did do a cram course.
Hopefully it reads like Danielle Steele, though. It's not that long.
Just like that, with not as much sex.
Thanks.
But tell me something. Yeah. Why did these people talk to you so candidly?
That's a great question. It's a question I continue to ask myself at some times. But I think there were two issues. Early on in the project, I was trying to get behind the scenes, and I really wanted to tell the story from sort of the personal perspective. You talk about institutions that are too big to fail. I wanted to talk about people who themselves thought they were too big to fail. And I think that there was a view among some early on that they wanted to help me reconstruct the historical record, that there was something important here. And I actually remember one of my very early interviews was with a CEO who actually showed up at the interview with these notes from the weekend at the Fed, the Lehman weekend, and these notes were better than any reporter's notes you'd ever seen. He'd actually drawn out on the piece of paper where everybody sat. And I thought, I hit pay dirt. And so there were those people, and there were other people, by the way, who participated clearly to save their legacy, to spin, to screw the other guy or their best friend or what have you. And then there also became an inflection point, a moment where certain people who didn't want to participate, I think, recognized that I had gotten along pretty far in the process. I knew that you were at the meeting at 2 in the afternoon and so was there, and you had taken a call, and this is what you said. And once you could actually go to somebody with a lot of information, I think more people felt compelled to participate. Having said that, there are characters, not many, who felt compelled to do it through a lawyer or to not participate.
And you'll be telling us those at the end of the interview.
Right.
So great. So here is your author's note. You quote Galileo,
right,
and you say, all truths are easy to understand once they are discovered. The point is to discover them. So what did you discover? What was surprising in this process for you?
Well, the hardest part about writing a book like this is the ending, right? We all know how this ends. And so the trick was trying to figure out how many twists and turns there were along the way that we as the public and me as a reporter didn't know. And I thought if I give you enough twists so that you could, and I think that the biggest twist, the biggest truth was how much activity there was going on behind the scenes prior, frankly, to the Lehman weekend, and then after the Lehman weekend in ways that I don't think we understood. So, the book starts the day after Bear Stearns is sold to J.P. Morgan, and I use that as sort of an inflection point from a political perspective, from a Wall Street perspective, puts the pressure on Lehman Brothers. From that moment on, Lehman Brothers was talking to Warren Buffett behind the scenes. The government was trying to orchestrate deals with Barclays and Bank of America, not in September, but back in April, May, June, July. And so a lot of these folks saw the train barreling down the track, and they were all trying to get out of the way, and of course, sadly, they don't.
Right. And if you look at this, essentially, you've transformed this amazing moment in American economic history, but you have boiled it down to human beings who have obvious human traits. So what were those traits? What led us in, and what's come out of this? What are the traits that you really think led us astray? And maybe all of us.
I think greed was part of it. Hubris was part of it. Power, I think, actually, more than even those things. People talk about the need for money, the big paychecks. That was really actually a scorecard for a lot of these people. I'm not sure that it was the dollar amount itself that they were after. And it became a power play. It became a game. And I think that there was sort of a lack of appreciation for what your responsibilities are beyond to the shareholder, and what risks you were creating to the system.
Right. And frankly, it's funny, we can always paint someone the villain pretty easily. So I think as we were going through it, we said, Dick Fuld from Lehman, he's the bad guy, or those dunces at AIG didn't know what they were doing. But who were the heroes? Who did you find were even glimpses of a hero? You don't have to be the hero the whole way through.
This was actually a tough book to write because for a very long time during the reporting process, there was no hero. There was, frankly, no even heroic moment. And I got very lucky about maybe 2/3 through the process. Somebody mentioned something to me about John Mack, someone who I didn't actually think would be John Mack, the CEO of Morgan Stanley, someone I didn't think would be a big character in this book. And they said, do you know about the call? And I said, what call? And of course they said, well, there was a call with John and Tim Geithner and Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke. And if you can figure that call out, I'm not going to tell you more, you have your heroic moment. And there's a terrific moment where his company is really on the cusp of collapse, and the government says you must merge with JP Morgan, actually, if you can imagine that, for $1 a share. Do it now. And he stands up to them and says, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it to my employees. And I thought that was actually, for that moment, quite heroic, because I think had he not, I think there would have been a good chance today there would be no Morgan Stanley.
So you wrote this book, and 586 pages later,
Yes.
okay, what's changed?
Well, I think the sad part actually is that not enough has changed. The ethos on Wall Street is so similar. And it goes back to this responsibility issue about who are you responsible to. For so long you focused on the shareholder. Everything was done in the name of the shareholder. And now there's the shift, which is the government's come, they've saved people, they've saved these companies, and now the responsibility, how much of the responsibility has to be towards the taxpayer, towards the system. And we have had no new legislation. We may have some new legislation in the coming weeks and months about too big to fail firms, but at the moment they are still too big to fail. And frankly, my worry is that memories are so short on Wall Street that 2, 3, 4 years out, people who survived this the first time will then feel emboldened the next time.
And so now that we're in the midst of talking about regulatory reform, and I know everyone is very excited and gets their pitchforks out about executive compensation, I agree with you that I don't think that that's the primary issue. What are the two most critical things that you think need to get done in terms of regulatory reform coming out of this crisis?
Two things, and they're very easy to do. One is what they call resolution authority, which when you think about Lehman Brothers being this domino that cascaded throughout the system, it was because it went bankrupt through the bankruptcy process, which locked up all of this money and undermined confidence in ways that we never imagined. Regulatory authority is like the FDIC. It means that we could actually take over a hedge fund, an investment bank, an insurance company, and do it in an orderly way. So A, that's number one, that keeps you from ever having this type of crisis again. Two, and it's really actually the most important, is higher capital ratios, higher capital requirements, which means you need to have more money physically in the bank. And so when you hear today about all of these enormous profits all over again at Wall Street and bonuses that are so high, what would really happen is you take those bonuses and you put them back in the bank, and that would make the system safer. Now, it cuts both ways. In the immediate term, you probably won't get the lending that you want because people are going to have to put more money in the bank. But long term, those two things, I think, would make the biggest difference.
Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching.